Hi there, welcome back to the VMO YouTube channel. Well, today I'm out on the Bristol Channel coast and I'm actually fishing. It's not a tackle talk. I'm not going to be showing you the latest new gizmos. They've actually let me go fishing. So what I'm going to do in a short while, once this water drops out, is get some baits out there. There's a chance of several different species of fish today. More than likely we're going to be seeing thornback rays, perhaps a conger. There is an outside chance for cod. There's a few about it at the moment. That said, I have only got frozen baits with me, so I have kind of limited my options. But nonetheless, if there's a decent cod going past, it's not going to turn its nose up to a big squid bait. Right, well, once this water starts to slip away a bit more, I'll be getting set up. I'll talk you through the approach. Let's see what happens. So I am here really early today, but the reason for that is this spot does get popular. Now, I haven't actually fished here myself for probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. But like I say, different marks tend to go through different phases. And at the moment, this one seems to be in fashion. I see a lot of posts on social media, pictures of this place, fish being caught here. So I thought, you know what, I haven't fished here for a long time. Let's give it a go. It's quite a big tide today. It's about 11 metres on the Western Supermare scale. Not my favourite sort of tide for fishing this venue, in all honesty. I do prefer a neap tide. This whole stretch does tend to fish better on a neap. Let's get the right butt for the right tip. But yeah, like I say, there have been a few fish around, and this is one area that can produce the goods. So I'll talk you through my approach. Today, it's a pair of GBFS Pro rods, and this is the Mark 1 version. It's kind of my go-to really for the Bristol Channel at the moment. As a lot of you know, I've gone on to using fixed spools now after a long period of using multipliers. I find them so much more beneficial for lots and lots of different reasons. So there's one, the other one's exactly the same. Matching pair of rods, you know exactly where you're at then. There we go. So before we get into the actual fish, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this venue. So this is somewhere that I've fished since I was about, I don't know, 14, thereabouts, about 30 years ago anyway. And at that time you had these rocks and this weed that you can see here, but it dropped off onto clean sand and mud. There was the very odd snag, but it was generally okay. You could get away with using 15-pound line on a small Abu 6.5 multiplier, in fact. And there's not many places on the channel where you could actually do that when fishing this kind of terrain. Nowadays, unfortunately, there's a few line snags out there. Like I say, it has become popular. On top of that, you've got the added, I was going to say bonus, but it's not a bonus whatsoever, the added risk of braid snags. And braid is a horrible thing to put on your reel when fishing over this kind of ground. If you lose any quantity of braid, it becomes an awful snag for people to get hooked up on. Bad news, really bad news. So for that reason, I've got rotten bottoms on my rigs today. I'll talk you through those in a bit. So we've got low tide today at 2 o'clock. It's, what is it now, 11:05. So a few hours to go until the bottom of the tide. I'm hoping that we'll be straight into fish. We've got a really nice southerly wind today, light southerly wind coming over the top of the cliffs behind where I'm fishing. That's usually good news for this venue. It's quite mild, it's not too bad, you know, it's a bit grey and overcast, but it is good fishing weather. So, as I say, I'll talk you through the approach in a minute and we'll get to it. So yeah, it's just a case now of waiting for the tide to drop out, but it does mean I've got plenty of time to get set up. I hate rushing. There's nothing worse than you know that tide is ebbing away and time isn't on your side. And you're frantically trying to put your rods together and get your reels on, and you're messing around there and it's not fun. So let's find some reels, take everything out of the box. We don't want to be getting muddy later on. So as I say, it does drop off here onto mud. It's a bit messy, so anything you don't want getting covered in muck, leave it up here on the rocks. So I've told you about the rods that I'm using today. On the rods, I'm going to put a pair of Shimano Power Aero 14,000s. Now, yeah, they are expensive. They are very expensive reels. There's no two ways about it, but they are built to last and they perform impeccably. I've been using these now for probably, I don't know, a couple of years, perhaps 2.5, maybe even 3 years now. And they really are strong. They are robust. They've got plenty of torque. And I honestly do believe that they are a more effective tool for this style of fishing than the multiplier. And I know a lot of people are going to be watching this and saying, yeah. Well, also, there's a lot of anglers out there who are considering going on to their first multiplier reel. And I'd actually question that nowadays. I would actually say, well, rather than getting a new multiplier, why not upgrade your fixed spool reel, get it set up correctly, and learn a very basic cast, and you will be able to fish a lot more effectively than if you're going to spend the next couple of years, because let's face it, that's what it takes to learn how to use a multiplier reel correctly. Some people will pick it up quicker, sure, but for the majority it does take a while. You've got all kinds of problems with the braking system, casting in the dark, stopping the spool in the dark when the lead hits the water, maintenance, making sure it runs correctly, all of that stuff. You do not need to worry about it with the fixed spool reel. So anyway, that's what I've got on there today. The Shimano Power Aero. There she is. Okay, and on there I've loaded up with 20 pounds Asso Ultra, and I've got a Seadra 25 to 100 tapered shock leader. Tapered shock leader on these reels is essential. It creates a really small knot. It means that when you're casting and as the line is leaving the reel, it can't catch on a bigger knot that you'd associate with a standard or a parallel shock leader. So that's both the rods set up. As I say, loads of water here still. Got to wait for that to drain out before I can even cast the lead. Otherwise I'll be bringing it in over the rough stuff that gives way to that cleaner ground. So let's take a look at the rig today. So no surprise really, it's a pulley rig. Okay, and I'll just show you from the lead upwards. So there's the lead, 6 ounce, more than adequate, big wires, 16 gauge 7-inch wires on there, tough as old boots. And these little rotten bottom clips, I get those off of eBay. Bag of, I think there's a bag of 50, not very expensive anyway, cheap and cheerful. And what happens here is, so you're casting out like that, nice and solid, it's not going to snap, nothing's going to go wrong there. Upon impact with the water, this bead, water pressure causes it to rise and it releases the lead. Okay, so what that means is if you do get snagged up, you're literally just going to lose your lead. You might not even lose your lead. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So let's pop that back on there a second. And up above the weak link system, the rotten bottom as we refer to it as, I've got a Gemini splashdown solo clip. Absolutely fantastic these things are. Been using them for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years now, quite a long time, whatever. But yeah, very effective. Again, they work on water pressure. So your hook is in that gap, or in this case, your dongle is in this gap. And I'll actually show you the hook in place now. And I've dropped it in the mud and it's a bit messy, but never mind. So there we go. There's the solo clip and there's our dongle clip, and that just locates in there. And we lock it down, he says, and we lock it down with the disc, and that's held firmly in place. So again, same principle, water pressure, pop, off it comes. Really simple, really effective bit of kit. So let's clip that back in there a second, and it'll make it easier for me to talk you through the rig. So there you go, we have got a dongle. Everyone's using these now. Really, really effective way to fish, in my opinion. Not for all species. I think smaller conger eels, you can have issues with missed bites, but for larger stuff, certainly smoothhounds, bass, rays, no problem at all. So the dongle itself is 80mm, including the clip. I don't use big baits for this style of fishing, okay? There's no need to use a big bait. What you do want is a potent bait. So that's going to go on there. I'll show you that once we actually start fishing. Onto there, Varivas 4.0 full circle hook. Brilliant hooks, made in Japan, high quality control, absolutely brilliant. You know, nothing wrong with those hooks whatsoever, love them. Going on to 80 pounds Asso Classic, and that is actually on a perfection loop. And that is our trace line. So £100 trace line, £100 body, up to the top of the pulley rigs. And I'm sure you've heard me say this millions of times before, but I don't really go in for the whole pulley swivel thing, okay? A decent standard swivel is more than enough for a pulley rig. You don't need all these fancy contraptions that people are using now. The best anglers I know use swivels. I use a swivel. I'm not one of the best anglers I know though. But there you go, that's my pulley rig, 4 foot long, thereabouts, 6 ounce lead. When this water starts to drain out some more, we'll get some baits on it. So before we get some baits on this hook, the first thing we need to do is grab some tools. VMO bait tool, VMO latex elastic, that's the fine grade. I find that's more than adequate for squid and bluey baits that we're using today. And of course, a pair of scissors. Cedra super sharp snippy scissors, snip snip snip. So remember what I said, I don't use big baits. There's no need to use a big bait, but you do want a potent bait. So how can we make a smallish bait more potent than it would otherwise be? So first off, there's a bluey, good old bluey, fantastic oily bait. Just going to snip the beak off, and then I'm going to cut off about that much, which from experience tells me should be around the length of the dongle. So let's get rid of that. And if I grab the dongle, which is still in the clip, okay, you'll see that, there you go, that's pretty much perfect. Just a little bit of the solo clip sticking out of the bottom to make contact with the bait clip. So what I like to do is take that bluey head section and cut it in half long ways. Just straight down the middle, like that. So I'm now left with 2 pieces of bluey head. 2 heads are better than 1. And I've got my bait tool, I've got my elastic, and I'm going to start by whipping one of those bluey heads onto the bait tool. And you know, there are loads and loads of different ways that you could go about this, and I've watched a lot of videos, I've obviously edited a lot of videos, and I've seen people doing this loads of different ways. I'm not saying mine's the right way, it's just how I do it, and it works for me. So half a bluey head on there. Second bluey head, I'm going to put it on in reverse. So there's the head section there, and there's the back of the head on the other piece, and I'm going to overlap them like that. So rather than having a dumpy tapered bait, I'm actually creating a more aerodynamic bait by overlapping those 2 little pieces like that. And that's the elastic snapping on the hard head of the bluey. Plenty of elastic on there. Give it a squeeze, mould it together a bit, and that's just nice. There we go. So then we're left with something like that. And I'm then going to get my dongle, and I'm literally just going to hold that against the bait. Okay. And with the fine elastic again, if I can find the end. Yeah, you probably noticed I'm wearing glasses again. It's something to get used to. Anyway, so there's the end of the elastic, and I'm holding the dongle alongside the bait, sticking the hook in my finger in the process. Okay, so there's the dongle, and I'm just going whip, 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 whip. And the bait is ever so slightly longer than the dongle. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. So plenty of that on there. You can see the blood oozing out of that bait already. Beautiful, looks tasty. So that's the bluey. Next thing I'm going to do is grab a squid, cut the head off, open it out so it forms a small triangular sheet, and I'm going to cut that straight down the middle. Now this is going to be a little bit too long for the dongle, and like I say, the initial bait was slightly too long, but this is going to be way over the top, so I'm just going to trim that down to size. And all I'm going to do now is lay that on top of there, like that. Okay, and now I'm going to whip it into place with that latex elastic. Let's give it a good squeeze. I'm surprised there's no one else down here today. It's a gorgeous day and the weather is looking horrendous at the weekend. Whip, 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 whip. Loads of elastic. And you should have something that looks like that. And then obviously bait tool, out it comes. And I'm just going to trim. You can see where the hook is. You can see that we have overlapped a little bit too much maybe. See that there? So scissors, snip, gone. And we're left with a lovely little bait bomb. A bluey head which has been cut in half, loads of blood pouring out of it, and he's all wrapped up in his squid sleeping bag. So the water's dropped out enough now for me to be able to make a start. There's still a little bit of water here, a little bit more than I usually like, but this will do for a first cast. So the other nice thing about using a fixed spool reel, you don't have to worry about wetting the line, making sure it's running okay, you know, especially if you've got new line on the reel, you can basically just go out and fish with it. So anyway, without further ado, let's get this one out there. So it's not a venue where you need massive distance anyway. I might even purposely chuck one in close on the second rod. We'll see how we get on. And once I move down onto the bottom, that's when I'll probably set that other rod up. That'll do nicely. There's a bit of tide run out there, so on the ebbing tide here it runs from right to left. It's never really that strong. You know, it's more obvious on the surface than it causing you issues. You know, you can see it moving across the top, but it's not generally a problem. You see it's just starting to pull around a bit. You know, that line coming off the reel in the tide. But it will ease off all the time. So let's get this one up on the tripod anyway. There's actually a boat anchored up probably half a mile away, just along the coast there. That's probably a good sign, you know, if you're seeing the boats tucked in here. Who knows? So nice bit of tide on the one I've just put out there. I'm actually going to just stick this one to one side for the time being. I do like to fish with one rod a lot of the time, if I'm honest. In fact, my most recent session, went out and tried for a few rays, one rod over 3 hours. I had 5 rays, including one which was not a bad one. And the problem is nowadays there are so many rays around that getting hold of a decent sized fish is a real chore, because you're literally battling against the smaller male fish. So we got that one out there. I don't think we'll have to wait too long for a bite today. I've got a good feeling about it. The weather feels good, it feels fishy, and a friend of mine often says that about whether it feels fishy or not, and you know, we might just be talking a load of old cobblers, but there are certain days where you go out and you think, yeah, I'm actually feeling this today. Right, let's get this rod out of the way for the time being anyway. Well, the first bait's been out there now, probably 10 minutes or so. Still plenty of juices flowing out into that tide. And that's what you want. Like I say, if you've got a really potent bait, it's going to be leaching out that scent into the tide the whole time. And a bait of that size, I'd usually leave it in place for probably 20 minutes to half an hour, certainly on the first cast. And if you wind it in after that time and you know it's pretty much gone, you know you've got to shorten your casts then and go down to about 15 minutes perhaps. But if there's plenty left on there, that's what I'll do today. 20 minutes, half an hour thereabouts. It's perfect. There's literally not a breath of wind at the moment. It's beautiful, really still, really quiet. No one else around, but then it is the middle of the week. You don't tend to see so many anglers out on these marks during a weekday. That said, 20 or 30 years ago you certainly would have done. There was a lot more fish around and it seemed there was a lot more people fishing for them basically. So I just baited up my second rig, and as you can see, very similar sort of thing. A couple of sections of bluey, a couple of strips of squid whipped down either side of it. You're basically taking the bait and you're cutting it into smaller pieces but presenting the same amount on the dongle. So yeah, that should cast nicely. Hopefully it'll draw some fish in. So that first bait's been out there now for best part of 25 minutes. I think we're going to have a look at it. Did kind of expect to have had a bite by now, but it is early in the tide. If it looks like it's a bit slow here, then as the tide drops out, I might move further up to the left. There's another little mark that I used to fish a long time ago, which can produce a better ray this time of year. So let's see if we get this one back anyway. Well, that came out of the bottom, no problem. Yeah, not a lot on there. A little bit of weed perhaps, which is to be expected. The tides are building at the moment, so it does tend to pick up weed and different bits and bobs off the tide line and drag it back out to sea. I have noticed though there seems to be a few whiting around at the moment, certainly further up channel. So I wouldn't write off seeing a whiting today. Right, so I've lost the lead off of this rig. Annoyingly, when it hit the surface. So what I like to do is just pinch the line between my thumb and forefinger. And here comes the leader knot. Just give the rod a good shake. You can see most of that's coming flying off. There we go, so the leader knot's through the guides. Makes it easier to work with when it's just above us like this. Just above the reel, I should say. Get it all off. If you want anything there that's going to potentially foul on your next cast. So, as I say, with the ease of that coming off the bottom, it wasn't snagged up at all. The lead basically snapped off when it hit the surface. That's quite a common thing to happen, especially if you wind very fast. I think the gear's coming through the water, and all of a sudden that change of resistance as it hits the top causes the lead to pop off. But you can see there's that lovely bait that we put out there, and it's still, you know, that could have gone for another 5 or 10 minutes at least. And you can also see how the rotten bottom released the lead, and had we have got snagged up on the seabed and we pulled for a break, if the lead was snagged, that would have snapped. We'd have got all of this and our shock leader back. So let's clip on this next rig and get it out there. So cast number 2, and this really is one of those venues where you could come here and first cast you're straight away into a fish, second cast and you can consistently catch throughout the tide. That said, the way that bait came back, I reckon it's going to be a little bit of a wait before we see a fish today, but that's okay. It's a nice day. It's a lovely day. In fact, it's just nice to be out. So hooked that one a bit, but it doesn't matter. It's right out there in the run. Yeah, that's in the tide, that's nice. Let's get him back to the tripod. And I do like to have my rod tips down nice and low. So there we go, I'm looking at that rod tip now, it's at eye level. I'm not straining my neck. No reason at all on a venue like this to have your rod tips up in the air. You see guys sat on their seat boxes looking up at their rod tips like this. It's just bad all round. Where that is, I've got a really good visual on it. I can see if I get a bite, no problem at all. Great stuff, let's get the other rig baited up. So there's bait number 3, ready to go out. Same thing again really, bit of bluey and a couple of strips of squid wrapped around it. Well, that boat that was a few hundred yards away, he's now moved, well, just downside of me. So it does make you wonder, doesn't it, when you've got all of that sea, is there a reason for a boat to come right in here, up in close against the shoreline? Could be a good sign. So it looks like I'm not the only one to have this place in mind today. There's another chap just up there, just setting up. Hope he gets a bite sooner than I have. So a second cast has been out there for getting on for 15 minutes now, still no signs of life. And I think what I'll do is I'll bring you back if we get a bit of action. Well, as you can see, I'm down here on the mud now, and it is still very quiet. I think I'm on my 4th or 5th cast, and I've got all my gear back so far, so that's a good thing. I've actually gone on to just leads now, no rotten bottom on there. Does appear to be pretty clean in fairness, so I'm going to persevere. Low tide is now, but usually what happens here, it will keep draining out for a little bit beyond the low water time at Weston-super-Mare, and the period around low water can be quite productive, so we'll stick at it. I've got the other rod on the rest there, and I'm going to change the bait that's out there. I'm going to get a cast out on that second rod as well now, so let's have a look. I'm not expecting anything on this cast, I've not had any bites, but it is time for a change of bait, so let's get to it. There's plenty of tide out there, and that little boat, he moved again. As you can see, he's moved quite a bit further offshore. And this ground underfoot now, it's not too bad. It was a little bit sloppy just up underneath the rocks there, but as is often the case, it firms up towards the low water mark. So this is the rod that I took the rotten bottom off and just went straight to a lead, so still catching up with the lead against the tide. There we go. Lots of weed, I expect. That's what it certainly feels like anyway. I suppose there's a slim chance that there's a small fish that was just sleeping on the ends, but that does feel like a real dead weight. So I'm guessing it's going to be weed and grass. And that's the trouble with these big tides. I'm really not a fan of big tides in the channel, I've got to say. Certainly on the low water marks. Neap tides do seem to be a lot more productive. So here we go. Well, at last, a fish. It has been real hard work today. I didn't even see the bite on this one, so I didn't show you obviously the bite because I didn't see it. And there you go. Thornback, plump female. Beautiful looking thornback though, in fairness. They are great looking fish. I don't care what some people might say, flat rats or whatever. But you can see there's that squid and bluey bait in there, and the circle hook just on the edge of the mouth where you want it to be. But that's a weighty fish. Look at the bulge. That's a nice female ray. Probably, well, I'll tell you what, I'm actually going to weigh this one out of interest. I'll go and grab the scales and I'll report back. Well, I popped you on the scales, £9, 12 ounces, so not quite a double, but on a day like today, I really couldn't care less. Beautiful, beautiful looking fish, these rays, in my opinion, and a blank saver. So, without further ado, let's pop her back in the water. Beautiful. Well, it's been a bit of fresh air, a bit of fun in the great outdoors. Fishing wasn't electric. Luckily, that ray saved the day. Not quite a double, but an enjoyable fish to catch all the same. Right, and on that bombshell, I'm going to pack this rod away and I'm getting out of it. But thanks for watching. Look out for more videos to come. I will be making more videos going into the new year. Hopefully the fishing's a bit better. I'll see you next time.